Welcome to back to the father-daughter experience. I'm Cesare.
I'm Celia.
And today we're going to be talking about names and what is in a name.
What is in a name?
Right? A rose by any other name
So much.
wouldn't rose by any other name smell as sweet? And so this was a conversation that we got into with your mother because we were talking to some folks the other day and somebody had asked us, what do you go by? Right? Like they had asked, do you go by anything else? And they were specifically, I think, talking to me. I think you've even had some of your friends say like, oh, does your dad go by anything other than Cesare? And you've answered like, not if you want him to like you.
Yeah.
Right. And so we looked into the origins of both of our names, just as kind of a little bit of a project for this episode. And mine is Cesare in Italian means long-haired, which I don't think is great because obviously I did not get long, luxurious hair.
It's true.
I do love my name though, and your name
Means heavenly.
Boy, somebody did a good job.
I know. Although you were really close. It's funny. In doing research for this episode, I realized that I've always thought my name meant like blind or like dark, because Cecilia's Latin origin is attached to like those words, but Celia, it comes from a different base word. And that word means heavenly. So I'm like, another reason my name is superior to Cecilia's in the world. Also, Cecilia, kind of an ugly name.
Also a terrible song.
No, I like that song.
It's a good song.
I don't like when people sing it to me
Correct.
with the wrong name, even though they say both names in the song.
They say Celia at the beginning and then it's Cecilia for the rest of the
Yes.
time. But Cecilia, the character in that song, is
a bad person.
Is not a very good woman.
That's true.
So for me, when you think about names, I also thought it was kind of funny because anytime I try to type my name into a phone, it immediately goes to one of the Latin origins, which was like Cesare, which was a name used for somebody who was cut from the womb. So that's where we get cesarean from.
Sure.
So very often it'll be funny when somebody texts me for the first time because they'll text really quickly and be like, hey, Cesare, and their phones will autocorrect my name to Cesarean. And then they'll send the text and just be like, shit. Sorry. I'm going to go in and change the editing.
That's funny.
But one of the interesting quotes that came up was a Dale Carnegie quote that says, a person's name is to him or her the sweetest sound in any language. And I thought about that quote, and I think maybe this is debatable for anybody who's listening, but I think if you have a more unique name, that probably becomes even more accurate. Because one of the things that I'm obviously very sensitive of and cognizant of is pronunciation of people's names. I will ask over and over and over again how to pronounce people's names. I've worked with a number of folks of Indian origin in my last jobs because I do a lot of tech work. And it's really tricky because some of their names, the inflection on certain syllables comes in the middle. Like we're so used to like forward syllable. I think it's like Cesare. Like the
it just sort of drives forward.
Right. So it's tricky.
We don't have as much intonation mid-word as other languages.
Correct.
Like when I've taken Japanese or Chinese in the past, and there's a lot of different sort of inflections in the way that you say a sound affects even the translation of it.
Which goes right back to like the name thing. And I worked, I work with a woman who is of Polish descent, which I am partially Polish, and her name is spelled Bozena. So it looks like Bozena. Like that's how we would pronounce it in America.
Sure, phonetically.
But yeah, just looking at it, it looks like Bozena. And I asked her, I'm like, how do I say your name? And she was kind of caught off guard because everybody calls her at work Bozena. And she said, it's Bozena. So it's that
there's another sound from
it's just right.
Those letters in that language.
Those letters in that language and the way she was raised and the name her parents gave her was Bozena. So I always say, like, if your name, I'm going to use Matt for an example. I have lots of friends named Matt. If your name was Matt and I just said like Met, like, hey, Met, like, no, it's Matt, or mate. What if I said mate? Hey, mate. It's like, no, it's pronounced Matt. I'm like, well, what the fuck do I care? I don't care.
Right.
Just because your name's easier doesn't mean it's you know, it has any less meaning.
No, I actually think about this a lot. I'm in the past few months have recently come into a new gaggle of friends who say names a lot more and like text names a lot more than I've ever had like in other friend groups. But I love it. I love to hear my name. I love it when people call my name because I think like it is special, especially because my name, much like yours, gets butchered quite a bit by people. So when people say your name, it does feel like an endearment. It's like,
It's
I
more
know.
respectful.
Yes. Well, and I will say, I know you've moved away from some of the nickname things, but like for me, and I think for you too, this holds true. The only time I don't want to hear my full name is when people in my life, and there have not been many, I think I can count on one hand, and I know each and every one of the names of the people who have given me nicknames and kept them. They have picked a nickname and they just start calling me it. And if people do it, I don't stop them because unless I hate it. And actually, I won't name names on this podcast in case she listens. But one of my friends has given me a nickname that the first time I ever saw it, I was like, you can't call me that. It's like, I hate it so much. I hate the way it sounds. But like, it was a name, like it's how she thinks of me.
I think,
and so I even like Cece or Cease, or even one of my friends here called me like Seal once, but then like did it like a couple more times, and I was like, I didn't say anything, and he was like, oh, I thought you thought it was annoying, and I was like, no, I was like, I like nicknames. I think they are the ultimate form of endearment, but I'm not gonna give you a nickname for me. If you wish to adopt it for me, and I don't say no, then like that to me is like the ultimate Celia, like green light. Like, yeah, you're good. I'll let you call me a nickname if I think it's cute and you can pull it off. But like, I'm not going to, like when people say like, do you want, like there was one time, I think sophomore year of high school, where I tried to say like, oh, I'll go by Cece, like if people want to call me Cece. And my teacher was like, well, you want to be called Celia or you want to be called Cece? And I was like, well, Celia, but you were asking if we had nicknames.
right.
And then at that moment I was like, oh, yeah, I'm never going to tell people to call me a nickname ever again.
No,
if people do, I like it.
The first time you did, it was you wanted to be called, I remember you coming home from daycare and informing your mother and I that you wanted to be called Celia Rose Linda.
Yes.
Because one of the
very cool
one of the girls, what a great nickname, Linda. listen, Linda.
Say my full name with another name at the end.
Yeah, my first name, my middle name, and my new second middle name as my new title. But I know exactly what you're saying, right? There are times when I had a coworker ask me once, what do you go by? Because I was sitting with somebody who happened to use multiple nicknames in one sitting with me because they were using kind of a proliferation of names that they've heard people use.
Sure.
So it was, Cesare, it was Ches, it was CT, and there may have even been a Chesy in there. I worked at a place where my asshole of a boss called me Chester.
Yeah, that sounds awful.
And that's one of those things where that essentially was one of those places where the boss gave everybody
like a nickname.
We're
buddies.
Everybody was like really shitty nicknames too.
Yeah.
Like one guy's nickname was Pig Balls at the place that I worked.
Oh dear God, that's so awful.
It had to do with a farming thing, and it was.
It doesn't matter. That seems not workplace appropriate.
It's not, but that's what happens when you are the owner of the small business where everybody works. You can pretty much do whatever you want because who are you going to complain to? HR? Like HR is him and like Pig Balls. So it's like when Pig Balls is your HR rep, you're not getting anywhere with that conversation.
Yeah.
But I think it's really, really important and for people to understand that like for people like names are important and they carry a lot of power. And I think that even goes back to last names or changing your name, right? It's really important. I think people assume that when you get married you will change your name, right? You'll take on your spouse's name. And it was really interesting. I know we've referenced this before, but your mother and I were in a women's studies class, and during one of the classes, a woman actually came at me and said something like, you know, I'm just the wrong person to fight with this shit over, because you're going to lose because I'll probably out argue you, but two, I'm also like pretty progressive. The woman was like, well, when you get married, like when you got married, like what if she had asked you to take her name? And I was like, I would have been 100% fine with it. Mm-hmm. Like, I don't, like go along with the construct that like a woman should have to take her husband's name. Like,
yeah.
Like if you get to a point where you end up marrying someone, male or female, and you ask them to marry you, like, does that put you in the driver's seat to then say like, well, I asked you to marry me, Jeff Wilson, just because I'm looking at a Wilson football. I mean, like a tennis ball. Mm-hmm. So it's like, Hey, Wilson volleyball. I guess that's probably where it was. Jeff Wilson, the volleyball thing. But it's like, if you're like, I hate your last name, I want you to be Jeff Ties now. Would you take that name? Like, I would have taken your mother's last name if it meant something to her. But, you know, your mother didn't care. She didn't make a big deal of it. But like, I think it's interesting when you think about changing your name or adding to your name.
Well, it's interesting. I've thought a lot about this. Obviously, like, I've dated people here and there and like had crushes where you're like, oh, my name with their last name at the end, heart with like a little arrow through it. I think the thing for me is that, strangely, though I don't want children, there aren't that many people left with our last name. Do you know what I mean? And there aren't that many people there aren't that many men left in our family right. that can have children that have the last name. So it's a little interesting to me in terms of, I actually am somebody who's very interested in legacy. And I think both in having a first name that people butcher and in having a last name that people refuse to learn. Like, even like longstanding friends of mine will be like, oh, well, like, you're Celia Tice. And I'm like, I just give them the fucking meanest look. I'm like, if you don't know how to say my last name.
Right.
Like, seriously.
And it's only 4 letters.
Yes. And so there is a part of me that feels like I am Celia Ties. And I always want to be Celia Ties.
Sure. So maybe you don't change your name at all if you get married.
Well, I think what maybe I would do is, and I would never hyphenate. I think hyphenated names are a little silly. I get that they work for some people, but I would rather either come up with a new last name or just keep my own. But what I think
interesting to create a name with your partner.
I mean, I think that it would be. I think that'd be an interesting way to sort of overcome that idea. Obviously, I think I'm a little bit more of a freewheeler in terms of my traditional ideals, in that I have very few.
Sure.
But I think for me, maybe what I would do, if my partner's last name was really important to them, I would take it as like my middle name, like on my licenses and official paperwork and stuff.
Well, your mother kept her middle name for a while. She kept her last name as her middle name on a lot of her documentation when we were first married.
Sure. So, I mean, again, maybe it's just, I don't know how many people feel this attached to their name, but like Celia Rose Ties being my full name has just always been like my full name in my head. And I do think it is an important part of my identity. I don't necessarily think everybody feels that way about their last name. So I think for some people it makes sense, like, or they don't like their last name, so they want to change it when they get married. But I think for me, I feel like and this is a self-imposed role. Nobody in the family, you guys or otherwise, has made me feel this way. I feel like a like self-imposed like legacy keeper. Like, I ask lots of questions and keep lots of stories and write these things down. And I want to have answers about like family members before they die or that are dead, or stories.
Sure.
As much as possible. And part of that is that obviously I don't have the Gear name or my grandmother's Franz name or
Nalatsny.
Yeah. I didn't want to butcher it. We don't say that name very often, but
it's pronounced.
But like
Nalatsny?
To me, like Ties just feels important to me. So I think I don't necessarily know that I would ask a partner to take the last name, like if we got
But don't
married.
take it away from me.
Yeah, but I think like for me, I would want it to stay.
Sure.
But kind
you
of
can fold in part of their
yes,
name into yours.
correct. But I wouldn't say like your name belongs nowhere in my life. Like I would want it to be there, or we could go by like that we're their last name family. Like people could refer to us as like that
Sure.
coupling, but that I'm still Celia Ties on all my paperwork and stuff.
Yeah,
And, like-
you maintain your identity. I think it
Yes.
can be. I mean,
And that's just something very important to me personally.
I will always say that it was, growing up with a more difficult name for other people was always something of a challenge for me.
Mm-hmm.
Because no one ever pronounces it correctly. When everybody looks at it, it looks like Caesar.
Right.
And so going through my life of early on, you really build a confidence because you have to learn that like you're saying that wrong. This is how it's pronounced.
Yes.
You have to get really comfortable.
You have to get over
the
correcting people.
Yeah, you have to get over correcting people and recognizing that like, yeah, you have to fight for yourself, or you end up like the woman I work with, Bojena, who allows everybody to mispronounce her name because she feels like it's just easier than correcting them. And I feel like that's your identity and I'll defend it. But I remember getting to a point where I did work at that place with the terrible nicknames. I got to a point where they didn't give me a choice. I started going by Ches. They put Ches on my business cards because they were like, this will be easier for other people. And I realized like that absolutely made me feel less like myself.
Yeah.
Like it does diminish who you are when somebody bastardizes or changes your name. And then I really did, when I left that place, really started going back by my full name. I worked with multiple people who refused to ever call me by a nickname and always were like, your name's really great and beautiful and I love it and I'm going to call you this.
But I think when you don't cheapen it too, it makes you more memorable. I think people remember you for you versus like a nickname.
Well, there's a unique...
Versus like, oh, like that's Ches.
Well, there's
versus like, that's Cesare.
That's, yeah, right. And so there's a uniqueness there, but the thing that I will obviously always have is probably the most lasting gift of having my name is, and I actually remember it was kind of funny. I mean, like now it was probably just a few years ago. I was talking to my mother and I said like, thank you for giving me my name because I realized that this name essentially, connected me with the person who I ended up marrying and being with solely based on my name being so different because, I don't think I've told this story before when we've been talking about it. You know this story. But the way that your mother and I met in high school was I had been living overseas. I had been living in Italy. I had spent 18 months. I won't do the real math, but roughly 18 months living overseas. I had left when I was a sophomore in high school, leaving the town I lived in. Your mother moved in right after me, knew my friends, started hanging out with my friends because she moved to the town I left. And so our friend groups were commingled. So when I came back my senior year, when we met, it was because I was at a party with all of my friends and your mother had a friend who was staying with her who called her up and was like, hey, I'm at this party. Can you come pick me up or just come to this party? And your mother's like, no, I'm not coming to get you. It's late. I'm already in bed. I'm not coming out. And this girl, Nadine, continued to kind of badger her and like get her to, she's like, no, you should come. It's really fun and blah, blah, blah. And it was a good time. It was a fun weekend. But what ended up happening was your mother then quizzes her on who's there.
Yeah.
Right? Who's worth me.
I got that from my mom.
Who's there? Is it worth me putting on some mascara and a gloss and getting my ass out of bed? And so the girl I'm with rattles off my friends' names. Ian, Ryan, Sean, Alex, Mike, John.
Yep.
I'm trying to remember if there was anybody else there. Let's say no. And then Cesare. And your mother's initial response is, who's she? She thought I was a girl. She had no idea. Nadine then says, no, this guy Cesare and I went to middle school together. He moved to Italy. I think she said Italy. At the time I went from England to Italy and then Italy and home. So the combination of being this mysterious European traveler and having a unique name made your mother get her dog, get in the car, and drive over to this party in the morning, in the early morning hours of the weekend, and show up at this party. And the minute she walked in the door, I chased after her, and
The rest is history.
the rest is history.
But
I owe it all to my name.
Mm-hmm.
So it's pretty important. I think I don't know if I can do better than that story.
No, I think it's like you've said, names have a lot of weight and importance. And I think, again, it definitely depends. I think maybe the more difficult your name, the more attached and caring you feel. But I think the people in your life also give your name like weight and meaning, whether it's in loving nicknames or in a negative way too. People can poison nicknames for you or poison variations of your name because they become shitty or they were bad in the moment and you hated them and you couldn't say no. So I think it's just something that I don't know that people consider all the time.
No, so I think we can. I think
It's
we
a
can
nice
end this
consideration to have.
Yeah, I think we can end this episode here. I will put out the PSA and I will challenge anyone who hears this in my voice that think about the people you work with, think about the people in your life, think about the people you come across where they maybe have a difficult or unique name.
Mm-hmm.
Take the time to ask them for the proper pronunciation.
Yeah.
Ask them and give them the respect of learning how to say their name properly. You have no idea the power that has for people when everyone spends all of their time screwing up their names and saying it wrong and not giving a shit. So
Totally.
be amazing, be awesome, be
Yeah.
good to people, and take that extra time to, write it down, write it in phonetics, make it easy for yourself, however you need to, but learn those names, everybody.
Mm-hmm. Get them down. All right, y'all. That is it for this episode. As always, you can find us at FatherDaughterEXP on TikTok and Instagram, Father-Daughter Experience on YouTube, and wherever you listen to your podcasts. If you like us, drop us a follow, a subscribe, a like, leave us a little review so other people can be encouraged to listen as well. And we will see you next Wednesday.
Bye.
Bye.